here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Curtis Ellis, a senior advisor with American First Policies and America First Policies Action, the number one, numero uno, and only political action committee that is sanctioned by President Trump himself. Curtis, great to have you.
Hey, it's great to be here, John. My phone's working today. We tried to do this last week, but my phone wouldn't cooperate.
I know, because it's a Huawei phone. And Huawei gremlins were in there. They've been, especially you, because you've been so critical of the Chinese. I mean, I bet they got all your phones bugged and everything else. Your house bugged, your car, everything.
That's right. I'm sure they're listening now. John Fredericks' show has a whole new bunch of listeners. 1.5 billion Chinese are listening right now.
Because they're listening to your phone, Curtis.
Yes.
Now, the president going to the G20, I thought it was an enormously successful meeting that he had at the G20 summit. And basically, he sat down with a dictator Xi, and he said, look, we have a relationship. He's a nice guy, but we'll see what happens. If they don't come to the table with a good deal, there'll be no deal. What say you?
Oh, that's right. And he stuck to that. He stuck to that. What we have now, China agreed to resume negotiating with the U.S. toward a comprehensive, enforceable agreement that achieves, as President Trump said, a balanced trading relationship between the U.S. and China. He said to Xi's face, we must have a balanced trading arrangement. It's been one way so far, and that cannot continue. It's very interesting that before this meeting, China had put out, the Chinese government, high-level officials in the government had said, as a precondition for resuming talks, all tariffs had to be lifted, and Huawei, the Chinese telecommunications company, which is actually a cyber espionage arm of the People's Liberation Army, had to be taken off the U.S. blacklist, which prevents American companies from doing business with Huawei. Well, President Trump did neither of those things, yet China came back to resume negotiations. The tariffs that had been at 10% and then went up to 25% on May remain in place at 25%. The president said he would postpone indefinitely proposed tariffs on $300 billion of additional goods imported from China. Those tariffs have been postponed indefinitely while these talks resume. Huawei remains on the blacklist. Now, what the president said was American companies could sell equipment to Huawei as long as that equipment does not pose a threat to national security. And that's essentially what was in place before. There's always been, when Huawei was placed on the blacklist, companies could apply for a license to essentially an exemption and a license to sell goods if and when the Commerce Department determines it's not a national security threat. So if we want to sell them chips for them to make their crappy, cheap smartphones, they can do that. We can do that, but we could do that before. So the president essentially gave up nothing. And what he gained in return, besides the Chinese coming back to the negotiating table to play footsie, whack-a-mole, and rope-a-dope, actually the president's playing rope-a-dope with the Chinese. They have higher tariffs than they had in May. Those have not been repealed. What we gained is American businesses now have more time to reconfigure their supply chains and get out of China before the next round of tariffs on $300 billion worth of goods, which are mostly consumer goods affected on that last round of proposed tariffs. They now have more time to get their supply chains out of China and move them back to America, back to the Western Hemisphere where they belong. It's interesting by saying he is postponing the tariffs indefinitely. Well, indefinitely could mean forever, right? In that the tariffs that are in place will be there forever. So you see, if he had said, I'm going to postpone these tariffs for 90 days, some of these idiot corporate leaders would say, oh, well, in 90 days, all the tariffs are going to go away because there's going to be a deal. So let's not move our supply chains. Let's not move our factories out of China. But by saying it's going to be postponed indefinitely, that means we don't know when there's going to be a deal. And any responsible corporate manager would be looking for the exits, would have already been out the exits of China. You know, it's funny, John. Back in 2012, the Japanese started moving their supply chains out of China. They had a little tiff with China over the Senkaku Islands, some rocks in the East China Sea that China claims sovereignty to and Japan claims sovereignty to. And I don't know, some boats bumped into each other or something like that. And the Chinese went on an anti-Japanese jihad and started whipping up sentiment, and they started closing or serving papers on the Japanese factories in China as part of this propaganda effort and nationalistic effort targeting the Japanese. So the Japanese got the message, and they started moving their factories and their supply chains out of China so they weren't dependent on China.
Right.
Look, but did the Americans now? The American companies ought to be getting that same message. The Chinese Communist Party has declared people's war on the U.S. after the president raised tariffs to 25%. And the Chinese People's Liberation Army said, wouldn't it be nice if we sank a battleship and killed thousands of Americans? They are not our friends. It is obvious. Everybody knows that. And look, no responsible business leader would let his company, his business, be hostage to a sole supplier. You always look for a diversified base of suppliers. Because if you're dependent on one supplier, that supplier's got you by the short hairs, right? They can raise prices, they can cut you off, they can go to a different find a different customer to sell their goods to at a better price, and you're up the creek without a paddle, right? So every responsible business leader always looks for diversification in their suppliers. So they're not, if a natural disaster hits and a meteor strikes that factory of their supplier, they've got other places to go to, right? Well, what these American geniuses, business leaders, have gotten into by putting all of their factories in China, all their eggs in one basket, they've now become dependent on a sole supplier. And it's called the Communist Party of China, the Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
That's ridiculous. Investors should be asking the corporate leaders, are you diversified? Have you diversified away from China? And if the answer is no, it's like, well, I'm selling your stock. I don't want to be invested in your company because you're doing a crappy job of leading it. Mm-hmm. That's where we're at. So it's very interesting. And, for these companies that are whining, oh, well, we can't do this. Oh, decoupling from China is hard. Moving supply chains is hard. It is not. It's not impossible. It's hard. Well, that's why you earn the big bucks, my friends. Right. And it's not impossible, and it's not unprecedented. Remember, these companies decoupled from the United States 20 years ago, 30 right. years ago, and they decoupled millions of Americans from good-paying jobs.
Right.
So, it's time for them to decouple away from communist China and back to America and stop right. whining about it.
And in that time, they reaped the benefits of cheap labor, cheap cost of production, and made a lot more money and a lot more bonuses. And now they got to step up, is what you're saying. Curtis Ellis with us. Curtis Ellis, longtime operative in the Trump campaign, 2015 and 16. He also served in the Department of Labor, and he's now a senior advisor to America First Policies. Curtis, let me ask you this. It seems like the cornerstone of your position here is that when the president said that during the negotiation he will now suspend the additional $300 billion in tariffs that he was going to impose. He will suspend those indefinitely. Basic crux of your position here is that means that he will also indefinitely continue with the first 250 billion of tariffs that he's already levied on the Chinese 7 or 8 months ago, right? I mean, that's the basis
exactly.
of your position, right? That if you just look at it and said, oh, well, the president says he's not going to impose any additional tariffs, and there's not a 90-day or 120-day, but that means the tariffs that are in place stay because
that's right.
There's no timeline
exactly.
on those either.
The tariffs that are in place stay indefinitely.
Right, indefinitely. So there's no timeline to review those either, which means that if you're doing business in China right now and you've set up a company there or moved your company there and that's where your supply chain is based, you're now faced with these in perpetuity. So it's time to get out.
That's right.
Is that your position?
Look, businesses want certainty. Well, here's the certainty. You're going to have 25% tariffs on stuff made in China. That's the certainty. That's a certainty. You know, I get a kick out of this. We're told incessantly on CNBC and these geniuses with the MBA programs and everything, business wants certainty. Business wants certainty. Well, you know what? There is no certainty in life. There are very few certainties. Death and taxes, Benjamin Franklin said. And, you know, everybody wants certainty. I think families deserve certainty, too. Or that's why you can have a family. If I'm certain that I've got a job and I'll be able to raise the kids, you have certainty and you can raise a family. Businesses want certainty, but they want the rest of us to live on the gig economy, right, where you don't have anything. You don't know what you're going to get. If somebody calls for Uber, well, maybe I'll get paid today as an Uber driver. If they don't call, I'm out of luck. So, you know, farmers don't have certainty. Farmers, look at the farmers and the ranchers. They plant a crop. They don't have certainty the rains are going to come. They don't have certainty that the price that they're going to be able to get for their crop on the harvest, if the fields aren't flooded and they can even get in the fields and harvest their crop, that the price they're going to get is going to be a good price or a bad price. So, yeah, we want certainty, but you know, within context, let's put it in context. There's a lot of uncertainty in this world. So why should the business certainty, the businesses that crave certainty, why should they get it at the expense of American workers and other people? But,
absolutely.
Yeah, here's a certainty for you, business leaders. There's going to be 25% tariffs as far as the eye can see, and the other certainty is get out of China.
Well, that's really the message, and that's been the president's message from day one. That's why these tariffs are not going away. But, of course, the Republican Wall Street bedwetters, the pea pants leggers, are saying, oh, my God, we're not going to win because we're going to lose. We can't win a majority now because of this China tariffs. And the Wall Street Journal says we're going to go into it's going to be a disaster, and farmers are going to go lose money, and everybody's upset over these tariffs. And they're never going to go away, and let's just make it all go away. So they're peeing their pants here on a daily basis. But the economy is booming, and so the tariffs that are in place are bringing in money, and we're evening the playing field, right?
Right, exactly. And there are so many moving parts to the economy. These people that claim they can predict with absolute 100% certainty that these tariffs are going to cause higher prices for consumers, I mean, that's BS. Total BS. Look, first of all, we see no evidence for inflation. There was another consumer price and producer price index and intermediate goods price index came out the other day. No inflation whatsoever. 5 out of 10 of China's top exports, 5 of their 10 top exports to the U.S. are also made in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And these are Mexico's top exports. So, hey, here, you economist genius, here's another Econ 101. Competition leads to lower prices, right? So if China is got a competitor in Mexico to produce the same things they're selling to America, China's going to absorb the cost of the tariffs. Otherwise, they will lose that customer to Mexico, right? So this whole idea that the tariffs are inevitably going to lead to higher prices for consumers is based on a complete fallacy, a lie, or an assumption that there is only one supplier for that goods, that there is no competition, and that's wrong. That's not true. Or how about this? I guess Walmart is going to raise its prices. Well, I guess we should assume then that Walmart got on the phone with the people from Costco and the people from Target and the people from Kmart and said, let's all raise our prices at once. Otherwise, what happens if Walmart raises its prices? People go shop at Costco. People go shop at Kmart, right? Or it assumes that Walmart and Costco and Kmart all get the same goods from the same person, from the same company. This fantasy land.
It's
fantasy
propaganda. And look, the Wall Street Journal's already started with 2 articles that come out online today. I mean, it's just propaganda from Wall Street because they just want this all to go away. I mean, their life was great when we had cheap labor, cheap goods of production. Everybody made more money and they got bigger bonuses. That's what this whole thing was about. And so now they're whining and peeing down their leg because we still have tariffs and this meeting with President Xi. And look, here's what the president said, Curtis Ellis. He said, we're going to continue the negotiations and see how it goes. And we have a good relationship. And if the negotiations go well, then that's good. We can move forward. If they don't, then we'll have to continue down the path we're on. He said, but, if they lie to me again, basically he inferred this, if they lie to me again, I'll just walk away from the table again, like I did the last time. So we'll see what happens, right? We'll see what happens. Curtis, 2 more minutes. I want to change topics a minute. The Democratic debate. Who was the big winner? Who was the big loser? Sum it up.
I think Joe Biden was a big loser. He looked like a robot. He talks like a robot. He talks like Chatty Cathy. You pull the string and the same voice comes out all the time. He's interesting. He couldn't. I'm glad he defended states' rights. He put out the busing. Julian Castro, to me, looks like a space alien, but that's a whole other issue. It's just ridiculous that the Democrats were the huge losers there. They're for open borders, no border enforcement whatsoever, decriminalize all this border crossing, and give everybody free health care. Doctors tell you if you mix prescription drugs, you can have unwanted and bad reactions. If you mix the policy prescriptions of these Democrats, open borders plus free health care for anybody who shows up at our border, that's going to be a very bad interaction. You're going to have 1 billion people showing up at our border or just flying in and showing up at Kennedy Airport or someplace in order to cash in the chit for free health care. And only the sickest people will come, right? Because if you're well, you don't have a reason to come to America.
Right.
But if you're not well in Bangladesh and you can't get help at the hospital in Dhaka, what you do is you find your way to the United States where you're going to have a free doctor at your disposal.
It's insane policies putting their hands up. So they want open borders and free health care for the people who come through the open borders. And the rest of us, I guess, just pay for it out of the goodness of our heart until the entire country goes bankrupt. So,
right, and we can't even figure out how to provide decent health care to 300 million Americans. They're going to take away your private insurance, and we get to pay for free health care or health care for 1 billion people on Earth, 6 billion people on Earth. That's bizarre. Why don't we just provide doctors in Guatemala, in Central America, in El Salvador, in Honduras, as Julian Castro pronounces it, and save them the trip for coming here? Why don't we just set up clinics and hospitals down there?
And pay for it all.
Yeah,
with taxpayer dollars. Take it from the middle class and just say, hey, you have a new tax. You're going to pay another, $10 a day or something, and we're going to ship all these doctors down to Central America because that's who we are. That's their best line. It's not who we are. This is who we are. I don't know what that means. It's not who we are.
Yeah,
Open borders
they've got
isn't who we are either.
Hallmark cards. They don't have policy proposals. They don't have policies. They have Hallmark greeting cards. They have Hallmark moments. That's who we are.
All right,
congratulations, graduate. You've got free college now.
Curtis, we're going to the top of the hour. Curtis Ellis. Always good to have you with us, Curtis.